My neighbor needed a fake fiancé for a wedding weekend, and I said yes before I understood what I was agreeing to. But the moment her mom booked us a room with one bed, I realized this lie was about to cost me the one thing I'd spent 2 years pretending I didn't want. Her name is Jenna Cole, the woman across the hall who borrowed my ladder more often than she returned it, who knew my coffee order before I knew hers, who had somehow become the best part of my ordinary life without either of us ever saying it out loud. I'm Ryan, 34, the reliable neighbor with the truck and the tools, the guy she called when her sink flooded and the guy she never called anything more. We had rules. We had a careful, unspoken line neither of us crossed. And in one panicked Thursday morning conversation, she asked me to erase it, just for a weekend, just for her family, just pretend. But here's what she didn't know when she asked. I'd been in love with her since the day she moved in. So why did she pick me, the one man who couldn't fake it without breaking? What happens when a fake fiancé and one very real bed leave nowhere left to hide? And when her family starts believing a lie we can't take back? Will the truth save us, or ruin the only good thing either of us had left? It started with a knock. Not her usual knock. 3 quick taps, like she was in a hurry to borrow sugar or complain about my music. This one was slower, heavier, like her knuckles didn't want to do it. I opened the door and found her standing there in sweatpants and one of those oversized hoodies she wore when she'd given up on the day, hair pulled back messy, eyes red at the edges like she'd been crying in the stairwell before she worked up the nerve to come to me. I need a favor, she said. A big one, possibly illegal in some states. I almost laughed. Almost. Because that's how we talked, jokes first, feelings second, if ever. But something in her voice didn't match the joke. Cracked in the middle. Come in, I said. Before you say anything else. She sat on my couch the way she always did. Knees pulled up, like the furniture in my apartment had become an extension of her own. She'd been doing that for 2 years. Sitting in my space like it was safe. I used to tell myself that meant nothing. I was getting worse at believing my own lies. My cousin's getting married this weekend, she said. Big family wedding. The kind where everyone shows up to perform happiness at each other. Sounds fun, I said carefully. My ex is going to be there, with his new fiancé. Her voice thinned out on that last word. And my mother has spent 6 months telling every aunt, every cousin, every person with a working phone number, that I'm doing great, that I've moved on, that I'm, and I quote, practically engaged. I felt my stomach drop before my brain caught up. Practically. I panicked, she said. Months ago. She kept asking if I was seeing anyone and I said, kind of. And she turned kind of into an entire wedding subplot in her head. And now if I show up alone, it's not just embarrassing. It's a whole family event. A referendum on my life. I already knew where this was going. Some part of me had known since she walked through the door. Jenna, I need a fake fiancé, she said, all at once, like ripping off a bandage, just for the weekend, just so I don't have to stand in a room full of my family looking like the girl everyone feels sorry for. And you're the only person I trust enough to ask. The apartment went quiet. Somewhere down the hall a door closed. Outside, a car alarm chirped once and stopped. I should have said no. A smart man, a self-protecting man, would have said, Jenna, I care about you too much to lie about loving you in front of 100 people and then go back to being neighbors on Monday. That man would have handed her a cup of tea and gently, kindly, found her a way out that didn't involve me standing next to her pretending my heart wasn't doing exactly what it always did around her. Instead I looked at the way her hands were shaking around nothing, the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, the way 2 years of borrowed ladders and late-night porch talks and her laugh through my wall at 1 a.m. had quietly built something in me that had no name because neither of us had ever dared to name it. Why me? I asked, not to stall. I needed to hear her answer. She looked up, and for a second the joke dropped completely off her face. Because you're the only person who's never made me feel like I had to be anything other than exactly who I am. And because if I'm going to lie to my entire family, I want to do it standing next to someone who actually makes me feel safe. I didn't have a comeback for that. I didn't want one. Okay, I said. Her whole body sagged with relief, like she'd been holding her breath for a week. Okay, fake fiancé. 1 weekend. I can do that. What I didn't say was that it wouldn't feel fake to me. Not for 1 second. I'd been quietly, stupidly in love with the woman across the hall for 2 years, and she had just asked me to hold her hand in public and call her mine. And some reckless, hopeful part of me had already decided this was either the best decision of my life or the one that would finally break it. 3 days later, we pulled up outside a coastal hotel, my truck loaded with her garment bag and my one good suit, both of us rehearsing a fake love story on the drive like lines for a play neither of us had auditioned for. Her mother met us in the lobby with tears already forming, clutching a room key like a gift. "I upgraded you too," she said, beaming. "The honeymoon suite. It's got the most romantic little touch." Jenna's smile didn't waver. Mine didn't either. Not yet. Neither of us knew yet that the honeymoon suite only had one bed. Before we dive into scene 2, if you're enjoying this story, do me a real favor. My ex-wife once told me I'd never make it to 5,000 subscribers on this channel. So let's prove her wrong together. Hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss how this one ends. Now back to Ryan and Jenna. The key card sat on the dresser like a small, cream-colored bomb. Jenna picked it up, turned it over twice, like the room number might change if she stared hard enough. "One bed," she said. Not a question. A verdict. "Maybe there's a pull-out couch," I offered. There wasn't. We both saw it at the same time, the small decorative sofa by the window, the kind built for a magazine photo, not a 6'2" grown man. Beyond it, the actual bed took up half the room. White linens turned down. A scatter of rose petals across the pillows like the hotel staff had personally decided our fake love story needed a soundtrack. Jenna picked up a rose petal and held it up like evidence in a crime. "My mother did this. I know she did this." "Romantic," I said. "Tasteful. I'm going to kill her with kindness at the reception," Jenna muttered. "Slowly. With a butter knife." I set our bags down and tried to sound casual. "I'll take the floor." "You will not." "Jenna, it's one night." "It's 3 nights," she said. "And you are not folding your entire body onto hotel carpet because my mother has main character energy about my love life." We stood there, 2 grown adults negotiating sleeping arrangements like a peace treaty. Pillows down the middle, separate blankets. A very serious, very solemn agreement that nothing about sharing a bed meant anything except logistics. I almost believed we could pull it off. Right up until she came out of the bathroom in a soft green dress for the rehearsal dinner, hair down, a little nervous smile on her face, and asked, "Too much?" Too much wasn't the problem. The problem was that for 2 years I had trained myself not to look at her like this, and my training just failed completely. "You look beautiful," I said. Before I could stop myself, something shifted in her face. Not panic. Something softer. "Thank you," she said quietly, and for one dangerous second, neither of us moved. Then her phone buzzed, and the moment broke, and we were just 2 people late for dinner. The rehearsal dinner was candlelight and clinking glasses and 100 relatives pretending not to stare at the girl who'd finally brought someone home. Jenna's hand found mine under the table before we even sat down. Fingers laced tight, like she needed the anchor more than the performance. Then her ex walked in. His name was Grant, and he had the kind of smile that had clearly never once doubted itself. His new fiancée floated beside him in something silk and expensive, completely unaware she was standing next to a man who used to make Jenna feel small for fun. "Jenna," Grant said, eyes flicking to our joined hands. "Wow, this is new, isn't it?" Jenna said, voice light as air, nothing in it betraying the way her grip on my hand had turned white-knuckled. "Life's funny. So how'd you 2 meet?" his fiancée asked, sweetly, innocently. I felt every eye at the table turn toward us. This was it, the moment we hadn't rehearsed enough. "Neighbors," I said. 2 years now. He fixed my sink," Jenna added, and then kind of never left. A ripple of laughter went around the table. I felt her exhale beside me. "And the proposal?" someone called out. "We want details." I looked at Jenna. She looked at me. And in that half-second, something took over that wasn't performance anymore. "I built her something," I said. "In my garage. A little wooden box. Told her it was for spare change." Ring was inside. Jenna's breath caught, just slightly, just enough for me to feel it. "What did you say?" her grandmother asked, leaning in. I should have said something generic, something safe. Instead, I looked at the woman beside me, really looked at her, and told the truth wearing a costume. I told her that 2 years of knowing her taught me what safe feels like. I said that she's the first person who's ever made an ordinary Tuesday feel like something worth showing up for, and that if she'd have me, I'd spend every day trying to deserve that. The table went quiet. Jenna's eyes went bright and startled, like I'd handed her something she wasn't prepared to catch. "He also cried," she said, voice unsteady, breaking the silence before it could crack her open. "I did not," I said. "A little." Everyone laughed, and the moment folded back into safety. But under the table, Jenna didn't let go of my hand. Not through dessert. Not when her mother dabbed her eyes across the table. Not even when Grant watched us with a frown he couldn't quite smooth over. Later, out on the terrace, away from the noise, the ocean air cooled the back of my neck. Jenna stood close beside me at the railing, arms wrapped around herself. "That was dangerous in there," she said. "I know. How much of what you said was real? I could have made it easy. Could have laughed it off, called it method acting, given her the exit ramp we'd built into this whole arrangement. Instead, I turned to face her, close enough to see her breath catch in the cold air. "More than I planned," I said. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something back. But before either of us could move, before 2 years of almost could turn into something we couldn't take back, her phone lit up on the railing between us. A text from her mother. "Don't stay out too late. Lovebirds. Also, Grant wants to have breakfast with you both tomorrow. Isn't that nice?" Jenna stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. "Tomorrow," I said slowly, "can be complicated." She looked up at me, and for the first time all night, she smiled like she meant it. "Tonight," she said. "Let's just not be complicated yet." Morning came in gold through the curtains, and for one groggy second, before memory caught up with me, I forgot anything was fake at all. Jenna was curled toward me, her hand resting flat against my chest like it had wandered there on its own overnight. The pillow wall we'd built so carefully now kicked somewhere onto the floor. I lay still, barely breathing, half terrified that moving would break whatever this was, half terrified it already meant something neither of us could take back. Her eyes opened, found mine, found her own hand on my chest. She didn't pull away. "I was cold," she said quietly. "That's all." "Sure," I said. Neither of us moved for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds that felt longer than the 2 years before them. Then a knock hit the door, and the spell broke. Room service and a note from her mother. "Breakfast with Grant and his fiance, garden patio, 10 minutes. We're something cute. Both of you." Jenna groaned into the pillow. "I'd rather eat glass." "Noted," I said. "I'll ask the kitchen." The garden patio looked like something built for a magazine. White umbrellas, tiny pastries no one needed, and Grant sitting there already, sunglasses on, looking like a man who'd rehearsed his own charm in a mirror that morning. "So," he said once the coffee arrived, eyes flicking between us, "how long has this actually been going on? Because last I heard, you swore off relationships completely." "Slowly," Jenna said. "Some things take time to become real." "Real," Grant repeated, like the word tasted strange. "With your neighbor." I felt her hand find my knee under the table, not gripping in panic this time. Steady, deliberate, a woman choosing her own ground. "Yes," she said, "with my neighbor, who's shown up for 2 years without ever once needing me to perform for him." Grant's jaw tightened. Something in his polished composure cracked just slightly, just enough to see the man underneath it, the one who used to make her feel like too much and not enough at the same time. "You used to be easier to read," he said. "No," Jenna said, calm as still water. "I used to hand you a manual for how to love me because I was scared you wouldn't bother figuring it out yourself. I'm done writing manuals." The table went silent. His fiancée looked between them, uncomfortable, unaware she was watching the door finally close on something. We left breakfast with Jenna's hand still in mine, and behind a wall of climbing roses, out of sight from the patio, she finally exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for years, not minutes. I thought I'd feel triumphant, she admitted. Mostly I just feel like I need a nap. I can help with that, I said. After the wedding. She looked up at me then. Really looked, the joke draining out of her face. Ryan, what happened last night? The things you said at dinner were true, I said, before she could talk either of us out of it. I've been in love with you since you moved in and asked to borrow a ladder you never returned. I've been in love with you through every fixed sink and every late-night porch conversation, and every single day I told myself this was just friendship because I was too scared to risk losing you by wanting more. Her breath caught, hard enough for me to hear it. This isn't fake for me, I said. It never was. She kissed me then. Not for an audience, not for her mother watching from some window, not for anyone but us. Slow and certain and nothing like pretend. The ceremony that afternoon passed in a blur of white chairs and ocean wind, but I remember the exact moment Jenna found me in the crowd and smiled. Not the performance smile she'd practiced in the mirror that morning, but the real one, the one that had quietly undone me for 2 years. That evening, under string lights in the reception hall, her mother stood to give a toast, glass raised, eyes already shining. To my daughter, she said, who finally let someone see her completely, and to Ryan, who I suspect was never really pretending at all. Jenna's hand tightened around mine. I didn't correct her mother. There was nothing left to correct. Later, when the music slowed and the dance floor emptied around the newlyweds, I pulled Jenna close. No rehearsed lines left between us. No audience this time, I said. Just me asking. For real. She placed her hand in mine like it was the easiest decision she'd ever made. Then yes, she said. As real as it gets. 6 months later, there's a small wooden box on her kitchen counter. Not the fake proposal prop, but a real one I'm still working up the nerve to fill. Her sketchbooks live on my table now. My sawdust ends up on her jeans. And some mornings, when she stands barefoot in my kitchen holding coffee like she did the day this all began, she looks at me and says, "You know this is where the crime started." And I tell her some crimes are worth the sentence. If you've made it this far, here's something worth sitting with. How many people in our lives do we quietly love for years, but never tell, because we're more afraid of losing the friendship than we are hopeful about gaining something greater? And what does it actually cost us in the long run to stay silent, to stay safe?